On today's Roadshow, we've come to a stately home in North Wales, which is regularly voted as one of the nation's favourites. It's certainly a glorious traditional country house, but what makes it unique is that the lives of those who live downstairs, the servants, are documented in minute detail. The rows, the love affairs, the scandals, you name it. I'll tell you more about that later. Welcome to Erddig in North Wales, home to the York family and their servants for over 250 years. And today, home to the Antiques Roadshow. Coming up.
It belonged to my grandmother, who was on the Titanic.
We will go to Paris, and you will play roulette.
Now, the next word that comes into my mind is bingo.
If this was bought with pocket money today, you'd probably have, like, Bill Gates as your father.
It was like that when we found it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
It's a good moustache, isn't it?
It's a very good moustache, isn't it?
If I could take these home with me today, I would. Thank you. No, you can't.
Well, there's an old saying that all that glitters is not gold, but I think we both know, in the case of your table lamp, that it's glass. How did you come by this object?
Well, it went about 15 or 20 years ago, and it was covered in dust, but I could see there was something shiny, so it caught my eye.
Right. And did you know what you were buying at the time?
Not really, no. It was just
so dirty.
Just dirty and interesting, yes.
When you look at something like this, for somebody like myself, I'm thinking one name, and that name is Tiffany. So we're talking about Louis Comfort Tiffany, who was the man responsible for the glassworks. He's the son of Charles Lewis, who is the man that gave us Tiffany & Co. But you do hold your breath, because there are lots of Tiffany lookalikes that were made about the same time. And in this case, that time would probably be around about 1910.
Really?
Now, the reason I say that this is an electric table lamp, okay?
Okay.
And let's just think that electricity wasn't available to the masses until well into the 20th century. So when you see something like this, the first thing you want to do is look underneath the base. And I see written there, L.C. Tiffany, fab into my mind is bingo. I mean, these are, they're quite rare, to say the very least. Tiffany is the master of iridescence. But it's not just iridescence. He's had this piece actually engraved. So you cut through the iridescence to the underlying green glass. And these leaves are beautifully engraved. Can you see they're actually veined? So from a technique point of view, you're dealing with a good glassmaker. It's called Favril. That was the trade name. It's an Old English name for handmade, apparently. So, how much did you have to pull out of your wallet to buy this?
Well, I think it was about 15 or 20 pounds, something like that.
Right. If I wanted to buy that, I don't think I'd get away with paying less than £500 for it.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. Oh, gosh, that's a good one.
That was a very good you lot. Very good You're well trained, aren't you?
So I'm told that you are queen of the charity shops and that you go to them quite a lot. And
Rumour has it, yes.
Rumour has it. And what do you normally look for?
Anything that catches my eye.
And these caught your eye?
They did. Very elegant.
Yes. And they are beautifully made, that's the first thing. These are platinum earrings, set with diamonds and hung with natural pearls. Natural pearls. And they're very beautifully made, and they've got a tiny little hallmark here that tells me that they're French.
Right.
And some of the great jewellery houses have their origins in Paris, and we might hint at the shops of Cartier and Boucheron and Van Cleef and Arpels. It's that sort of area.
Right.
But more importantly, the date of these objects is rather interesting for lots of different reasons. They're made in about 1915, 1920. And that was a very high spot for the use of pearls, because the cultured pearl had not been invented, and that real pearls were at a huge premium. And even very modest ones of this nature were extremely valuable in real terms. In comes the cultured pearl. The bottom fell completely out of the market for the natural pearls, and it didn't really begin to ascend very much until fairly recently, when some very capable collectors of natural pearls became active, and it's cascaded down. Okay. So these are wonderful examples of just that: diamonds, button-shaped natural pearls. And twice, that's not enough, really. Far more than that. Tell me, how much in the charity shop?
£2.99.
£2.99, not even £3.
No, not even £3.
Oh, I'm following you around forevermore.
Oh, okay.
Forever, for lots of reasons.
Might say something.
Yes, it would, but it's got to be entirely. No, follow you around forever, because what you spent, not quite £3, is worth close to £2,000.
Wow!
We will go to Paris, and you will play roulette.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Just need to find a nice posh place to go to and wear them with pride.
So here we are in the land of the Welsh collie, and what have you brought along?
A couple of Welsh Dalmatians.
Is that what they are?
I think so, yes.
They are rather lovely. Tell me the background story.
Well, the background simply is that they came from my mother's home.
Yes.
We lived in northwest Wales at the time. They were always there when I was growing up, either end of the mantelpiece, and I always grew up with them, basically.
They are lovely examples of Staffordshire flatbacks. Do you know what I mean by a figure? Usually of a relatively modest nature,
right,
which, when you turn it round, has quite a flat back.
Yeah.
Well, these are actually pretty rounded, I'd say, for flatbacks. Not only that, but my goodness, they've got very prominent muzzles, haven't they?
They have indeed, yes.
They look very, very aristocratic.
Well, they originally came from possibly London, where my grandmother was in service at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. So they could originally have been in a townhouse in London of that particular era.
So you're suggesting that they were in a rather posh house, maybe?
Possibly they could have been, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, Staffordshire figures are generally made for quite modest households, but they did infiltrate some of the posher houses because they are so charming. The spaniels, of course, are the famous ones, and in my home country, Denmark, they didn't live on the mantelpiece, they lived in the window. And it was said that when the fishermen were at home, the spaniels sat in the window with their backs to the window. But when the fishermen went out to sea, the wives changed them so they faced out of the window to signal to the outside that the man of the house was not about, if you get my drift.
Yes, that's really interesting.
There was a time when these were a lot more, still going to put £1,000 on them.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think they're just great.
Oh, well, all of a sudden I've become a dog lover then.
Woof.
Yes.
One of the things I've always loved about Wales, as an Englishman, is slate. You know, it's the great material of Wales, it's the great industry of North Wales. This is why I'm very excited by this, because here is a carved slate panel. And we've got here a really extraordinary and very powerful scene of the 1930s. This is 1935. It's about unemployment, industrial change, depression. You know, we've got a family here, clearly out of work. The children are probably hungry. I find it a very powerful piece.
Well, my dad made them, and I was too young to see him doing it, but he was always in the shed. My eldest sisters and brothers tell me, carving his stones.
And what did he do for a living?
Well, he was working in the quarry, but he was more of an engineer driver. He was driving what they called then an American Devil, something similar in the quarry.
You're his granddaughter, in effect, yes. Tell me about the drawing.
Well, the drawing was made by the art master at the local school, and that's how all the slates started off. There are 3 in total, and then he would use little tools and sometimes only a hammer and a nail, you know, to carve these carvings out of slate.
We're dealing with a sculptor who is, I think, great, but unknown relatively. You know, he has no status in terms of, you know, Welsh art, British art. He's a discovery as far as I'm concerned, I think a very exciting one. It therefore makes his things quite hard to value because, you know, there's no sort of marketplace comparison.
No. We're going to make sure that it's seen, and it's I'm going to, you know, put it on permanent display in the new Canolfan of Ron. It's a new centre built with lottery funding after the school closed.
Fantastic.
And it's going to be there on show.
But do put information about him as well.
Yes.
We need a photograph of him.
Yeah, we have pictures.
Yeah.
Yes.
He needs to be brought to life. If I saw that somewhere and could buy it, you know, I'd imagine it would have a price tag of £1,000, £1,500. You know, it's a great object. They are represents what it was and what it's becoming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Erddig, like most country houses, employed dozens of servants to run the estate and look after its owners, the Yorks. But unlike most houses, the servants at Erddig weren't seen and not heard. They were celebrated as individuals. This is the servants' hall, and you have to imagine during the 18th and 19th centuries, this would have been full of maids, butlers, footmen, eating, talking, preparing for the day. By 1973, when the National Trust was gifted the house, it was where the last owner, Philip York III, lived, having retreated from upstairs, which had fallen into disrepair. On every wall was a reminder of when Erddig was in its heyday. And this is what's so unusual: portraits of dozens of servants commissioned by the York family. The tradition began in 1793, and each painting was accompanied by a poem about the servant written by the family. And this is one of the earliest, Jane Ebrel, housekeeper, 87 years of age, and it starts, "Here comes the mother of us all." It talks about her sense of humour, to become a coachman for the family, and it ends, "And may she yet some years survive and breed her grandchildren to drive." This continued for over 200 years, later with pictures replaced by photographs. But the poems remained. Here along the servants' hallway I can feel a grandchildren who also worked as staff for the Yorks. And the poems record rows, breakups, scandal, just like in any big family. Thanks to all these pictures, we're left with a unique echo of lives that usually went unrecorded, the lives of those who toiled downstairs. Slowly, the York family shifted from charmingly underfunded to properly broke. And in 1973, the house was finally gifted to the National Trust.
Well, this is almost a local story, really, isn't it? These lovely, lovely figures by a lady sculptress from she was born in the 1870s, Lucy Gwendolyn Williams. What can you tell me about them?
Well, they belong to my grandmother and my mother, and they were given by a family friend who knew Gwendolyn Williams.
If we look at her in the context in which she was born in the 1870s. I think her father was a clergyman, but they must have been kind of a relatively middle-class family because she went to Wimbledon College of Art. Now, you think during the period, in the Victorian times, there really weren't that many ladies who actually were able to go to art school, and she was obviously incredibly talented. But these date probably from the 1920s, 1930s. She had a very long and illustrious career. I think she didn't die until about 1955, so she lived a grand old age. So her kind of working life really spanned, quite a long period. She did quite watercolours, but predominantly she was known for her sculpture. Which one's your favourite?
I would say the one that belonged to my grandmother, which is, I believe, called Primrose. The other one is my mother's and a favourite of hers, of course.
Well, I must say this one would be my favourite as well. I don't know whether you've ever wondered what they're actually made of. They look like bronzes, but this one's much heavier.
The weights are very different.
So this one, the zinc alloy.
Right.
Which we would normally call it spelter. But I love them. They've got the initials
yes,
LGW on the side there.
Lucy Gwendolyn Williams.
So I would say if they were to come up for auction, and I've only ever seen a scant handful over the last 10 years or so, this one would probably sell for somewhere in the region of £2,000 to £3,000.
Gosh.
And this one, possibly a little bit less, but still maybe 1,500 to 2,000.
Right. Gosh.
But they're lovely things, and it's so nice to see something with, obviously, a Welsh association and a lady artist as well.
Yes, and I am Welsh from Mid Wales too, and so
you were the perfect custodian of these.
Them, yes.
Well, thanks for
I'll look
bringing them
after
in.
them. Well, thank you very much, Lisa.
So thank you for bringing these wonderful wristwatches to us today. What I love about them is that they're rather cool and trendy, and it's your age group that's collecting these watches at the moment. Yeah. So what we have here is a Rolex GMT from the 1960s and a steel chronograph by Heuer. And I noticed just before we started filming that on the side we've got someone's name.
It's my great-grandfather's name, John Stephen. He had it inscribed when he got the watch himself. Squadron leader.
Okay.
He served from the beginning of World War II all the way into the mid-60s.
Seems to be very proud of him.
Yeah.
And he presumably bought this and you inherited it through what? His son, your father?
His son and then my mother.
Fantastic. Do you know anything about it?
All that it's from 1960s era, and he got it whilst he was deployed away.
Okay. Do you know what sort of airplanes he fought?
He flew Hurricanes, Spitfires, and then after the war he was a test pilot for jet fighters.
Wow, that's impressive. That is seriously impressive.
Yeah.
The Rolex is what's known as a GMT master. The colour of the indices, you'll notice, are quite yellow, aren't they?
Yeah.
And we call that a pumpkin dial because it's got that pumpkin yellow colour, OK? They started to be made in the mid-1950s.
Yeah.
And then we know that this was bought in 1960, so it dates from there. What I like about the fact that you brought the Heuer in beside it is that most people don't know who Heuer is. They think it's TAG, T-A-G,
yeah.
Technique Avant-Garde, who bought Heuer in the mid-1980s. But when they were just plain Heuer, they were sponsoring Formula One races. They were specialists in making things like ceramic brakes for the Formula One world. Yeah. And they got a great name doing that, and TAG bought them out. But before they did, they made a side of the winder, which denotes that it's a chronograph or a stopwatch.
Yeah.
And it is a step above the ordinary Heuer. This is reference 2446C, which means compression. The case is called the compression case. Dates around 1970.
Okay.
And it's a good example, and it hasn't been polished up, and that's why I like it particularly.
Yeah.
So, am I exciting you with this?
I am actually very interested.
They are seriously cool watches.
Yeah.
The Heuer at auction, £8,000 to £12,000.
Okay.
Okay. The Rolex at auction today, minimum £15,000 to £20,000, possibly £20,000 to £30,000.
Okay.
So you picked the coolest, best watches you could probably bring to the Antiques Roadshow.
Very pleased it came out much better than I thought. I thought I would just find out a little bit about the history and they'd be £1,000 maybe, because they're quite big names. Not that they'd be that kind of money, that's crazy.
So this is a watercolour by Cuffin Williams, who I used to know, actually. He was the great Welsh painter, isn't he? And he's done your regimental mascot.
This would have been Taffy from a long, long time ago. We've got a long affiliation with Cuffin. He's done other pictures of the soldiers in the battalion. Obviously, we've got the regimental goat here too.
Yeah, with the current incumbent, as it were.
That's right.
Because you're looking his best, isn't
He certainly is, yeah.
So it's the 18th century, is that right? You've had a goat as your mascot?
That's correct, sir. The first reference is 1777 by Robert Donkin, indicating that the regiment of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers was led by a goat with gilded horns and flowered ringlets.
I really like his headgear as well. That's incredibly smart bit of silver, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, look, the watercolour itself is probably worth about £200 or £300. Not a lot of money, but it doesn't matter because because these things are about meaning, aren't they? He's a magnificent beast. He really is.
This head seems to be kind of blotted with moss and lichen and things like that, and it's a little bit grubby. It looks to me like it's kind of been lopped off the top of a statue and lives in the garden. Would I be correct in saying some of that?
Yes, we found the head in the garden after renovating our house about 9 years ago. It was this bush, And there was the head.
And it was under the bush. Right, OK, so where has it lived since? Has it just always still been out in the garden?
No, went into the garage and has been on a shelf in the garage ever since.
Right, OK, so it's kind of at least been sort of inside.
Yeah, it's been inside
Right,
since.
OK. Well, listen, it's a really difficult one to decipher in a way, but I could see that it had a kind of a sparkle, and it felt like a very hard stone to me, but it was very soon apparent to me that it's a sandstone. And I thought about a quarry that's not a million miles away from here called Manly, which is a very famous quarry, in fact, and it's been quarried since Roman times, and it's particularly well known for its very, very hard sandstone. Right. And then that started me racing again, and I thought, right, well, has it got a bit of a Roman look to it? No, it looks a little bit kind of stylised to be Roman, but in a medieval way. And then I started thinking, actually, hold on a second, loads of people used to imitate medieval style. Had you ever thought about the age of it?
No, we had no idea.
Do you live in an old house?
It's about 100 years old.
So, OK, so it could be that sort of age or a little bit older. Do you live near to anywhere that's even much older than that?
Next door, the house is a bit older.
Right.
I couldn't tell you quite how old, but it is an old sandstone, what was a farmhouse.
Right, OK. Look, I'm going to stick my neck out on this because I have a fairly good feeling about it. Stylistically, I looked at it, and I have to say, it looked very 15th, 16th century to me. So how does that make you feel about it, the fact that it could be, say, 500 years old?
Yeah, I'm shocked that it's that old.
And will the temptation now be to take it out of the garage and do something with it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And even give it a bit of a dust?
Yeah, definitely.
With a light paintbrush?
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping, actually, that the temptation won't be to sell it, though, because it sounds to me...
Oh, no, I wouldn't sell it.
Not even at the thought that it might be worth £1,500 to £2,000.
Wow. No, I still wouldn't sell it. No, I wouldn't sell it.
Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you.
It's a little-known fact on the Antiques Roadshow that they actually choose the items to film to complement what the experts are wearing. How did you choose it?
Well, I didn't actually choose it. This was a gift to me from my 3 children in 1988, and they bought it with their pocket money, which would have been very little amount, and gave it to me as a Mother's Day present from a jumble sale in Rill.
Why did they choose it? It's sort of...
Well, I think my youngest daughter would say that she chose it and that she's probably going to try and make a claim for it at some point.
So I think you know it's by Clarice Cliff. It's marked so on the bottom. This is a range called Inspiration, and this probably dates to about 1933. And it was really Clarice Cliff who was one of Britain's top ceramic designers. Yeah. She was a pioneer of her time. And you know, this really shows her at the height of her powers. And whilst, you know, shapes are very much her, the colouring is quite different for her.
Yeah.
And as I say, it shows a confident designer who really felt she'd arrived. If this was bought with pocket money today, you'd probably have, like, Bill Gates as your father, because this would cost you £1,500 to buy now.
Oh, good gracious. Well, I am... that is amazing. I don't love it any more now because I know it's £1,500 worth, but I still just love it.
The name of our challenge this week is Basic, Better, Best. You know the score. We have to value things from the lowest value to the highest. And Duncan, you brought along some silver.
I have.
All very different.
Yes, well, in fact, these aren't even silver. These candlesticks...
So that was a good start.
They are made to look like silver. Candlesticks might now seem like a bit, you know, old-fashioned, but if you wanted to stretch the day past sundown, you had to have candles. And silver ones make a lot of sense because they act like jewellery in a room. The candlelight twinkles off them, and they might not seem very twinkly under electric light. Really important to your room, made a big difference to your interior.
Tell me about each one, then.
Well, all of these are the latest fashion in candlesticks. These were made in about 1765. They are the height of neoclassical good taste, but they're made from a very exotic imported metal from China called pactong, which shined up... Pactong, good word, isn't it? It shined up to look like silver, and they were absolutely the latest fashion. Everybody wanted a bit of pactong in 1765.
Right.
In date order, these are solid silver. They're made by the firm of Matthew Bolton, and they've been supplied probably to an ambassador. It's absolutely the height of fashion in about 1830. These ones, also solid silver, somewhat later. They're made by the firm of George Jensen, but they're designed by his son, Soren. And they're made in about 1960. So all three of them were the last word when they were made. It's exactly what people wanted in their house.
And what kind of values are we looking at?
Well, there's a big difference in value, actually. One set is worth about £2,500. One set's worth about, say, £7,500, £8,000. And one set's worth about £15,000. Big difference.
Look at you all. Ooh.
So the question is, which one's which?
What do you think?
I think they're best.
Yeah.
Better.
Basic.
Basic.
The George Jensen or the Soren Jensen. Young man, which do you think is basic?
That one.
The ones in the middle?
Yeah.
And you think they're better? They're not silver, of course. The others are all solid silver.
Oh.
Oh, changing your mind. Oh, my goodness. What do you think?
I think those are the better ones.
Icon, isn't it?
I think they're the most expensive because of the age. Because he said
1765.
1765.
What do you think? Which do you think is the best?
The ones on the far left.
These ones,
Yeah.
gleaming gloriously.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
No, I think the middle ones.
The George Jensen,
Yeah, I
the
think
Soren Jensen.
they're the shiniest, so I like them
The
best.
shiniest. Oh, gosh, Duncan, this is hard.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Honestly, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue, but...
thrills me.
Oh, God, there's nothing else. I literally have no idea.
I'll give you a clue.
Oh, come
I'll
on, give me something else. I don't know where to start.
What do you think would be the most desirable set of candlesticks for now?
Right. You think the middle? Everyone's saying the middle one. I don't even like the middle ones. OK, I'm going to go... I love them. Basic. Better. Best.
The crowd is absolutely bang on the money.
Oh, my God! Well done! Thank you. That is not what I'd have said. Right. Well, talk us through it then. How did I inadvertently and you deliberately get this right?
I'd have to say I agree with you. If I were taking them home, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
These were more valuable, and they probably will be in the future. They are exceptionally rare. Years ago, they used to be terribly, terribly valuable, but that was then, and this is now, and they're not at the moment. They're right out of fashion. £2,500.
£2,500. OK.
These are lovely, and they're made by the right maker, and so on and so forth. But with the best will in the world, you'd struggle to get more than about £8,000 for them.
Which is still not bad.
It's still a lot of money. What surprises me more than anything, and it clearly surprises you too, is that these little fellas are not much older than me. They are very simple. Arguably, they look as if you might have bought them from a plumbing shop. And they're worth £15,000.
Wow. My goodness me. Well, no thanks to me, but we got that right. I think it's thanks...
Now, these two pictures, they look like stained glass windows into a different world. And I see they're both signed Seliger. And he was this very prominent American artist, Charles Seliger. But I'm wondering how these American pictures found their way to you here today in Erddig.
Well, my father went to work in America. He was commissioned to do some ceramic work there, and he met Charles at work, and they became very good friends. And my father was going to have an exhibition there as well, and I should imagine when we left, they exchanged pictures.
I think that's a really nice gesture because it's something that artists often do. And I think it's amazing that Seliger gave your father these two pictures, because if we look at them a little bit more closely, they are beautifully painted. Seliger has used ink, he's used watercolour, and he's used tempera. And tempera is a sort of egg-based paint. This one, we've got a fly. And then this one, it's called Stone Age. And it almost feels, again, that he's taken energy. Do you like them?
I quite like them, yes. I prefer landscapes.
And apparently Seliger, because he took so long to complete these pictures, he only painted maybe 10 a year. So it's pretty special that he would give these two to your father. Now, the other thing that excites me about them is that they're both dated 1949. And I think one of the special things about Seliger as an artist is that he was discovered by possibly one of the greatest collectors of her time, Peggy Guggenheim, and that Peggy gave him his very first exhibition in 1945. If these were to come up to auction today, I think they'd be worth at least £1,000 to £1,500 each.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Can you hear what this is? It's made of copper. Who do you think it's made of copper? You think it's made of copper? Any other suggestions? No?
Enamel.
Enamel. It's enamel on copper, so you're all right. How long have you owned it?
Nearly 40 years. My late mother-in-law inherited the content, a van, and drove to the New Forest and fitted everything we possibly could in the house in the van, and that was one of the items, and I've had it ever since.
So this was bouncing around in the back of the van?
It was, yes.
The problem with that is that copper does not like sitting with enamel on it.
It was like that when we found it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I've not damaged it. Yeah.
Are you absolutely sure?
Yeah.
Because on the back of this, here you have the lovely, lovely turquoise reverse. Obviously something damaged this at the back, and somebody decided to write number 5 in it.
Don't know anything about that.
That's not you?
That's not me, no.
I think somebody owned this plate and they wanted to put it into an inventory of their works of art.
Yeah.
And so they thought, well, I'm not going to write on the copper because that would be a shame. So what I'll do is I'll chip out a little part of the copper and write in the gap. Let's go back to the main business, because there you have the 8 Immortals, very, very, very popular Chinese theme, beautifully painted in these very pastel enamel colours, and then framed by a very vivid, almost sort of saffron yellow border. But the problem with enamel is it doesn't like sitting on copper, and so you get lots of hairline cracks, and you've got lots of hairline cracks. Somewhere in Canton, in China, sometime in the mid-18th century.
Right.
So it's old.
It's old.
Yeah. And in spite of all the little hairline fractures, this area with the Immortals is still in good condition. So I'm going to put an 18th century price on it, which is going to be, well, I think somewhere in the region of somewhere between £2,000 and £4,000.
All right. Very good.
Yeah. That's not bad, is it?
It's not bad.
So when you put it back in the van...
Oh, it's not going in the van now. No.
It's not?
No, but I've got a dirty ring on the wall where I took it down this morning, so it's going back where
it's
it
going
came
back
from.
on the dirty ring.
Yeah.
What a beautiful pair of very strange miniature vases. Tell me, where did you get them from?
I bought them about 20 years ago at a local auction, and I was just taken by the unusual design of them, really, and the colour.
So are you a collector of ceramics, or...?
Yeah, I collect things from the arts and crafts movement.
From 1860 around to 1900?
Oh, yeah.
And the strangeness of the design points me in the direction of one particular designer, Christopher Dresser. Period. But he wasn't really an arts and crafts artist. He was a designer who designed modernism. He designed for some of the top companies in Britain, and a small mark on the base can confirm they are actually Minton. Probably about 1880. So when you found them, what did you like so much about them?
The colour, actually, the colour which is a beautiful turquoise, and the gold and the quite unusual, like, floral emblems on them. I've never been able to understand what this little piece in front is for. I can understand that maybe you put a little flower in there.
Yeah.
But this bit, I'm not 100% sure about.
Can I tell you?
Yep.
The menu holders.
Oh.
There's my BBC lunch ticket.
Oh,
and
right.
the menu would just sit there,
Yeah.
and then a spill of flowers would just form over it.
Oh, how nice.
What a beautiful plate setting. Christopher Dresser designed for Alt, designed for Linthorpe, but his best work is for Minton.
Was it?
He was inspired by Japan. You can see a few flowers around the edge, just below. the gilding, I just love them. I just think they are the best thing that I've seen all day. And although you collect arts and crafts, and you're in the period of arts and crafts, which Christopher Dresser was, it's very hard to get it. He's in Art Nouveau, he's in the aesthetic movement. He is a forward-thinking man ahead of his time. He was. So you bought them. Did you pay a lot for them?
I bought 2 other vases with them in one lot, and I paid £30.
£30.
Ridiculous.
So an auction valuation today would be in the region of £800 to £1,000.
Blimey, that's very nice.
If I could take these home with me today, I would. Thank you.
Well, you can't.
Yeah.
The 3 of you worked in local mines here in the area, didn't you?
That's correct, yes.
And this is your pit whistle. Now tell me what this did.
Well, this was used to mark the start of the shifts and break times and anything like that, with dealing with how to get up out of bed and how to be on time. Unfortunately, every now and again there'd be some sort of disaster and it would blow continually for about a minute.
So the rescue team, when they heard this, and the fire brigade and myself as an engineer, it told us all to go to the colliery and see what we could do to help.
That must have sent real fear through the community. I know you lost a friend down the mine, didn't you?
And he happened to put his head between 2 tubs and he was squashed.
And he was how old?
18.
18.
Well, when that happened and you were down the coal mine, you always considered whether you would ever go back down again when you heard of a disaster, especially if it was someone close to you. But in a couple of weeks, you more or less forgot it, and it was a way of life for us. You know, we just left school and went down the coal mine, and that was...
That was that?
That was that.
I mean, it was such an important way of life here in this area, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And was so important here because this house subsided because there was a mine underneath, and you were working in it, I gather.
I worked here at the time.
Underneath, yeah.
So you were busy toiling away underneath and you nearly brought the house down.
That's right.
Well, here you have your pit whistle. I've spoken to our experts, and as a value, they're saying £500 to £1,000 for this. But its value to you and to the community that heard it, well, you can't put a value on that, can you?
That's great.
Thank you very much.
The most interesting thing about this cup by a country mile is what's in. It's got a story that's a bit more interesting than first prize in an athletics tournament. Okay. So tell me, you've read the inscription. What is the story? What happened?
My great-grandfather was a sea captain for 40 years, and on one of his trips coming home from Canada to Liverpool, he rescued a crew of a shipwrecked schooner. 6 people had been stranded for a month.
For a month?
For a month they were wrecked, and apparently they were living off boiled turnips on the ship. There'd been several attempts to rescue them, but the last one had failed, and they'd basically had abandoned them. The sea captain of the Hibernia wrote a letter home, put it in a bottle, threw it overboard. My great-grandfather's ship, which was the Dennis from Liverpool, actually managed to rescue them, took them back to Liverpool.
All of them?
All 6 men and the captain,
Fantastic.
Back to Liverpool, yes. So, and a month later, the wife of the captain received the letter from the last letter written. It had been washed up on the shores of England somewhere.
A month later?
A month after he'd landed. So she knew he was safe, luckily. So my great-grandfather was awarded this cup for bravery for actually rescuing the crew from that ship, yeah.
And this is him?
And that's him, yes, Captain Philip Toke.
It's a good moustache, isn't it?
It's a very good moustache, isn't it?
If there are awards for moustache, it really genuinely saved their lives. They were sure that they were dead.
They were, yeah. They wouldn't have written that letter, but yeah. So
can you imagine the greeting they gave him?
I can't imagine what they were going through at all.
Yeah.
No.
And this is the newspaper article from the time?
That's the newspaper article documenting the rescue, yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Quite rightly, a proud family story.
It is a nice story, yeah, I think so.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. The actual cup, I mean, it's not hugely valuable. It's your family story, but standing on its own, it's worth about £250 only. But your story and this man's bravery and what he did for those 6 bereft sailors is priceless.
Yes.
Beyond treasure. It's an incredible tale. I hope you're going to remember this and to be able to pass this story down to your children in due course so that they can be rightly proud of their ancestors, and perhaps you'll keep the cup.
Well, for me, this really is the summer of love. Look at this beautiful Welsh loving spoon. Where did you get it?
This love spoon was made by my great-great-grandfather called John Williams.
Gosh.
And the story is that he used to make it, carve it, as he was waiting for his sweetheart called Margaret, who then became my great.
It's as good as it gets, because these were made, obviously, as profound love tokens to attract the young lady, and there's two hearts here which I think symbolise their mutual love. So where does this live?
At the moment, it doesn't belong to me. It doesn't hang on the wall at my house.
Right.
It's passed down to every eldest son of every generation.
Okay.
My first cousin, Mike, has it in his house at the moment, and it's been passed down since 1859, since my great-great-grandfather finished it.
Fantastic, and that date indeed is carved into the bottom of the stem of this magnificent spoon with July, so July 1859. Absolutely marvellous, and that's rubbed with red pigment, which is quite an unusual way of, you know, obviously embellishing the decoration. And this wheel here, this is made up of 5 hearts. And have you ever noticed 2 strawberries, the symbol of Venus, and also the symbol of love?
I didn't know that.
So this is smothered in love, you know, this, and you know that love has come down from 1859.
Yes, it has.
And for us to sit here and discuss the romance of others. Love spoons, the earliest dated one dates back to the 17th century. And before that, spoons were carved as love tokens, but not in such an elaborate form as this. They were given to be actually used for eating your broth or whatever. And it was only later that they started to develop into these really elaborate but totally useless spoons. You know, you could not eat your porridge with this, could you really?
No.
And this one, you probably notice, is covered in small chip carving. And this double diamond, that's a kind of symbol again of prosperity. You know, it's quite a treat. What does it mean to you, such a...
Oh, it means absolutely everything. I remember it on the wall in my grandparents' house. I remember the story of it.
Yes.
And my father, when he was a little boy, my late father, remembers his grandfather showing him the knife with which it was carved.
Good grief.
Yeah.
It's made of fruit wood.
All right.
It really is a very, very large example. They're often just half the size. There is a little bit of a chip on the lip of the bowl, but look, who cares? Who cares? It's worth it.
Dear. Well, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. Wow, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
So this is a completely untypical picture by Grant Wood, the Iowan painter. And it's painted in a very impressionistic way by an artist who is known, is very famous for his painting American Gothic. That's of the farmer with his pitchfork and his wife next to him, and it's painted in a very different way, isn't it? Not at all what you'd expect. So he painted American Gothic in about 1930. Right at the end of the Depression, really. But this, I think, could have been painted at any time during the 20s. Do you have any idea of date?
I think it would have been at least, well, maybe 1925, 26.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Because that's when my grandparents lived in Cedar Rapids. But this was given to my grandfather, who was an insurance salesman in the 20s and 30s, and he would travel around in his car every week and go around to these rural communities selling insurance or collecting insurance.
Cedar Rapids is where Grant Wood lived nearly all his life, wasn't it?
I do, yeah.
You do?
Yes.
So he's talking your language. He's used back of the brush in this very wet paint to get those effects of light across there. spontaneous feel to this, don't you think?
It does, and I think that's what I like about it. It's obviously, when I look at it, it's like you can feel what it was like the moment he was painting. It still feels fresh and energetic after all these years.
Do you think it was done out of doors then?
I do. It feels that way to me. It feels like it was done on site, and like he was looking at what he was painting. And
which is presumably, if not a garden, then just a very rural sort of farm by the looks of it, with a little bridge over a weir and a rivulet here.
Yeah.
That's an American scene, isn't it? I mean, we're still in Iowa, aren't we?
Yeah, it was Stone City, Iowa. I think it was an artist colony that he lived and worked in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For a while, and I think this was probably done just, I don't know, like part of his normal studio work.
But in America, this would be a very popular picture. I'm fairly sure it's worth between £8,000 and £12,000.
Okay, even though it's not like his other work.
Doesn't need to be. He's a much collected artist.
I believe this is something of an inheritance that you brought along today.
It is, yes. It was left to me by a very dear.
Was it something that you looked at for years and said, "Oh, I really like that"? Or
I liked it, but I never thought anything special about it. It was just she got lots and lots of things all over the house, and so I like lots of things, but it was one of those.
We're talking antique-y things?
All sorts
all
of
sorts.
stuff, yes.
OK. She sounds like my type of girl.
Yes.
Anyway.
That's why I've got a bag full that you haven't even looked at yet.
No, but I'll look at that when we've spoken about this lot, OK, because I've got a queue going on forever. But anyway, let me ask you. So you brought it in today. What inspired you to bring it in?
Well, my husband and I, we went to Whittick Manor, a National Trust place.
That's near Wolverhampton.
Yes, near Wolverhampton. And we just about had time after going around the whole property to look in the museum. And there they've got this big collection. And I said, oh, I've got one of those.
It's a vase which, I have to say, sent all the bells ringing in my head. We are talking about a man, and his name is?
William de Morgan.
William de Morgan. We've had William de Morgan pottery on this programme several times, but when I see a piece like this, it excites me. Right. Everything on this pot, practical way, and the lustre is this wonderful ruby lustre, which William de Morgan perfected. But let's have a look at the mark on the base. So here it is. Get it the right way up. It says here, DM Fulham 2208. Now, this pot has got the initials JH on there. Now, that's interesting. That's a decorator called James Hersey. And Hersey is said to have only decorated pots in the early 20th century. So I don't think this is going to be much later than 1906, if that.
All right.
Can we talk money?
I don't know. I'm really nervous.
Oh, right. OK. Well, don't be nervous about money, because whatever it's worth, it's yours, isn't it?
Yes.
And you've got a treasure. Because would you ever want to sell that?
I don't think so.
No, neither would I.
I like it too much.
Exactly. So I would say I would have to spend at least £3,000.
Gosh. Wow. I don't know what to say.
Well, let me ask the question. Has any of your godparents left you anything like this in your lives? I think that sums it up, really.
Favourite Bond? Sean Connery, Mark.
I mean, he's iconic, and Dr. No, I suppose.
Dr. No, but particularly I think with Goldfinger, when he's outing in Goldfinger there, with the car, with the gadgets, with the plot, with John Barry's theme, Shirley Bassey's soundtrack with that.
Absolutely. It just sticks in our mind. And presumably, as a young boy, this stuck in your mind, this great hero, and led you to collect what we're looking at now, which is props related to James Bond films.
Indeed.
So tell me about this jacket.
This jacket was worn by Daniel Craig, and Daniel wore this actual jacket in Casino Royale. That was his outing as James Bond in 2006. He's going down the runway on top of that wagon there to defuse the bomb, and that was the jacket that he wore. It's a really nice jacket.
So this is a key moment, an exciting moment in plot. Bond doing what Bond does so well. And of course, watches. We've You've got Q, Desmond Llewellyn, of course, playing him so famously. Watches and the technology and the gadgets are another part. So I presume this looks like it was worn by, it says, Pierce Brosnan wearing it.
The world is not enough. It was the last outing for Desmond Llewellyn. So it was the last time he played his role as Q.
But I get these two. These are related to iconic moments in films. They're great Bonds and they're very recognisable pieces. What on earth is this?
This equipment here, and Peter Hunt edited the first 5 Bond movies. His first directorship was on Mighty Secret Service in 1969, and this is the equipment he actually used on the Mighty Secret Service.
So what fires you to collect this? I mean, why do you do this? Obviously, you've got that love seeing films initially as a young boy, but why are you collecting all this? What's it for?
It's the music, the location shots, the actors with it, it's the plots. It resonates with so many people.
For me, I think items like this are not necessarily the sort of things that are going to have the mass-wide appeal. I don't see really these going much over sort of £1,000 or so. Key pieces, very recognisable from key moments in a film, absolutely great. I mean, what's the jacket worth? £3,000 to £5,000 maybe? But I think things like the watch bring in another aspect. I think you're looking at somewhere in excess of £15,000, maybe even £20,000 for that.
Good grief. Good grief. It's unbelievable, really, when you think.
You're quite shocked, aren't you?
It is. It's a shock with them, really, and the value of them, yeah, that is nice to know that the investment is secure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The value of my teacher's pension, very much so.
What I love about antique jewellery is the journey that they've taken and also the people that have owned it. And this ring has a very, very special journey. Can you tell me about it?
It does. It belonged to my grandmother, who was on the Titanic with her husband and mother and sister. They were taken off onto a lifeboat, but unfortunately her husband didn't make it. But she was wearing the ring at the time, so that survived. But she'd lost a child the year before. She hadn't been married more than a year and a half. And it was because of that he took her on this voyage.
And how old was she at the time?
She was very young. She was about 18.
18 years old?
18, 19.
So what actually, I mean, she was wearing this ring? What actually happened?
I believe they were told to put on any jewellery they had at the time.
Were they?
She had other jewellery that was in the purser's safe that obviously went down with the ship. But yes, she was wearing this.
That makes me have goosebumps just to think about
it's amazing.
it. What class did they travel on the Titanic?
They were travelling second class. I think they were originally going to travel first class, but then my great-grandmother and great-aunt joined them.
To be with them. And this is a first-class ring. It really is, in every sense of the word. And it has a signature inside saying La Cloche. Now, La Cloche had a shop in Rue de la Paix in 1901. In Paris, but they also, in 1904, they had a shop in Bond Street. All the rich and the famous and the dignitaries would all buy La Cloche jewellery. And this is definitely an engagement ring because you've got the emerald there, which also means hope, renewal, rebirth, life. Yeah. And the diamonds are all set in platinum. And the fact that emeralds can be quite brittle. So, its journey of surviving with her as well, the fact that it has survived that is quite incredible. Yeah. Quite incredible. And it is in stunning condition. The actual price of it, let's forget the Titanic aspect of it for the moment, I would say that's going to be in the region of about £6,000 to £8,000.
That's nice.
But
it's not going anywhere.
Well, no. Well, to have the Titanic factor, I mean, that is just to be verified to get a price. Sure. But it could be easily in the region of £30,000.
Oh my
goodness.
Okay. Wow.
But the fact that something so small is so powerful in how it survived. And a wonderful memory of your grandmother.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, never met. Yeah.
Very, very privileged to see it.
That's really interesting. But, it'll stay in the family.
I'm sure. Thank you so much for bringing it in.
It's a pleasure.
What a wonderful day we've had here at Erddig, seen some wonderful treasures. And what about Daniel Craig's jacket? If only he'd been in it. From the Antiques Roadshow.